Hey everybody, this is Nick Allen with Better Together. Excited to celebrate our first interview for Union Month here at Better Together, where we're interviewing union and association leaders across the Western Slope, specifically Mesa County. And today we have Tracy Seremak here from the Mesa Valley Education Association. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to sit down and chat with you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we'll just go right into it. Our first question here is just tell us a bit of your history, both as an educator as well as a union member.
Yeah, so I've been a union member since 1998, when I first started teaching in a suburb just north of Chicago. And I found back there, you automatically joined the union. That was what everyone did, right? So our members
Hmm.
virtually 100% in our school district. And I was glad I did because I found out after a while that my voice alone sometimes wasn't listened to, and that
Mm.
interfered with my ability to, be effective in the classroom. So then I can join my union members and make sure our voices are heard, so we get what we need, so we can be there for students. And then I came here in 2013 to Grand Junction, and right away, knowing the power of a union or association and what it can do to make the environment and situation better for teachers and kids, um, I kind of just joined the union and then eventually found out how to get involved here. Um, and it was about 7 years ago, one of my colleagues came up to me and said, I think you should get more involved.
Mm. Hmm.
So I was a building rep, was what we called it back in Illinois. And then here, of course, we call them association reps. And so I was trying to represent my colleagues, but I was working at the district office as a teacher on special assignment. So it was kind of awkward, an in between position. But we still, we worked closely with teachers, trying to advocate for what they needed as well as what we needed to support the teachers. And then eventually moving into becoming the secretary of our association and now the vice president.
Fantastic. How long have you been with District 51 then?
Since 2013.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. And then you were teacher on special assignment for a bit, and then you now are teaching at Palisade.
Yeah, I teach math at Palisade High School.
Okay, and how long have you been at Palisade now?
This is year six closing up.
Okay, nice, nice. Well, you mentioned at the beginning about, you recognized quickly that just one voice really wasn't breaking through. Why do you think unions are important to, uplift the voices of the workers?
So I spent a couple years as an assistant principal, the
Okay.
some say, and I found that I quickly started to forget what it was like to be in the classroom working directly with students. And luckily, I had a mentor and a couple friends who made sure I didn't forget.
Mm.
I might make decisions that I think are good decisions that end up negatively impacting people in the classroom. And, I don't think that there are many, if any, leaders in a school or a district who intentionally make decisions to make things harder
Right.
or convenient for teachers and students. But, they sometimes do make those decisions and don't realize it. And
Mhm.
so if you have not one voice, not two voices, but multiple voices that approach this leader and say, hey, this isn't working. Let's work together to figure this out, right? Collaboratively, um,
Mhm.
better for teachers and students in the classroom so that we can be there for our students. I think that's important.
Right. Yeah, the collaboration portion is so important from that union aspect because you're right. I mean, a lot of whether it be a building principal, or you're just your manager at work, across the board, they're gonna have other pressures. A lot of them have their own bosses, right? And so being able to kind of help bring that collaboration and balance can make a big difference. What do you think in your career, both just as a teacher and then as a union member, like what is something that you've brought up or you've identified as a big need that was helpful for your kids?
There have been quite a few.
Okay, yeah, go right ahead.
Pretty vocal, and once I found my voice and found that I had this group of people behind me backing me, right? So my second year of teaching, so that would have been 2000-ish. There was a building assistant principal who didn't understand that time and place to ask things, and
Mm,
he insisted on interrupting my class time and pulling me in the hallway while I had a class of 35 freshmen
okay.
trying to teach them, and demanded I explain another situation to him. And I told him, I was like, this is not appropriate nor the time. I was like, let's meet after school. And he was taken aback because no one had
Mm,
interrupted him for a while. And here was me, a little 20-something-year-old who was kind of standing up to him saying it's not the right time
hmm
to understand that. So that was my first situation that I clearly remember where the confidence in my voice, which came from the people that backed me as well, right? It wasn't
hmm
me saying it, but like, you can't demand my time when I'm with students because I know what my rights are. And then just over the years, I have been lucky that most of the principals I've worked with have been open to me approaching them with issues and trying to collaboratively solve them. So I'm trying to think of something specific here in Mesa County and working with principals here. Um, I would say when I worked at Grand Mesa Middle School, my principal there, he knew what he was getting when he hired me. So he was
Yeah, good, right?
but we kept having these leadership meetings, and at the time it was instructional leadership, and we were having them at like 7 o'clock in the morning and working up until just before kids got there. And for us as teachers to feel ready for students to come in the classroom was kind of stressful. So, I told him, I was like, I can't do this. We have to have an ending time to this a little bit sooner so I can be there for kids.
Right.
Right. So we were able to kind of work it out with the group and figure out a better time to meet. Um, and then some other situations, so many.
Well, the thing that I like as you're thinking of your next one, I think just every example you gave is in service of the students, in service of the work, right? If you have someone that's pulling you out of a classroom with 30 plus kids, you can, tell them real quick, hey, everybody, like turn to chapter 6 or whatever, but they're still missing you in that instruction. And there's a time and place for that to happen. Or I got a class in 5 minutes. I got to print off like 200 copies of this. So could we meet like 5 minutes earlier or just kind of end a little bit sooner? Like these are things that without a union, without people behind you, it's just you as a teacher and being like, oh, well, no, Miss Seremak, you are going to meet with me, you personally. And it's not going to fly. It's not going to be good for your students.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think the most recent situation where I felt that my voice and the collective voice behind me had a really positive impact, not just on me, but on a significant portion of my colleagues. We had an in service, and there was inadvertently time consumed to
hmm
take pictures. And it wasn't our building leadership's fault, right? Like they did what they were supposed to, they scheduled things, and it's just like the photography company took forever. And
Sure.
it consumed an hour and a half of our day. And I went to our building leader and I said, you need to give us time back. And I said, if you don't, you're going to have issues. Like, I'm upset about this. And not, I wasn't threatening him, but I just knew that everyone was so mad because that's an
hmm
hour and a half of work time that they could have had in their classroom. And so they pondered and our leadership team talked. And then we got an hour and a half the next day for everyone to just be in their classroom working as opposed to it being like mandated time to do something else.
Right. Right. I mean, that's so huge. And it gives you, and you mentioned like contracts and like it's even stronger than an employee handbook, because that's part of the system within it. But this is another entity of the workers, determining what can be helpful for the students, the teachers, and that's awesome. Um, yeah, I think, what you mentioned that experience being outside of the classroom for a while and how that, you know, made you realize, oh, there's some things that are missed. What do you think? What would you tell people that are outside the classroom? Some of the biggest hurdles or things that, a teacher deals with on a day-to-day basis?
Mm. that we have to make thousands of decisions.
Let me say one story real quick. My wife, I think, forbids me from asking questions for about the first hour or so. She gets home because you have 1,000 questions a day from kids, and I get it. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of them. I think reminding them. And of course, our leaders in buildings have a similar situation. They're making all kinds of decisions like on the spot throughout the day. Um, but they also don't have 25 to 30 kids in front of them that they have to constantly react to and
Hmm.
take care of, right? And make sure that this kid has all their needs met, and so does the kid right next to him, even though their needs might be so different, right? Um, I would say the the ability of us as educators to meet the needs of our students in such a diverse population, like diversity as far as like their needs, right?
Hmm. Right.
Um, I think that our leaders forget how exhausting that is. And then they ask us to be on committees and they ask us to stay for important events. And so when they ask that of us, they need to give us some time back to like decompress. You wouldn't believe how many educators are really introverted.
Hmm.
By the end of the day, they're exhausted having interacted with so many people. And with even with positive interactions, not negative
Hmm.
interactions, but just giving us some time to breathe and process and think about what we need to be doing in our classroom. I think that's the broad picture for me.
Right. Right. Yeah. Teacher tired. And
Mm.
it's just mentally and physically exhausted. You're on your feet, constantly and working with kids. And I think, the differentiation, right? And it's almost multiple lessons in one class period for how do you handle, like, especially with these class sizes, which we should get into soon too, but how do you handle differentiation like that?
So I handle differentiation through questioning. And then sometimes we do modify an assignment or as far as how much help I'll give each student. I also teach in Spanish sometimes to small groups within the classroom because I do have students who it's their first year in
Hmm.
their native language. Um, and then there are times where I'll create alternative assignments for students so they get what they need. You help students form groups a little bit differently, whether that be homogenous or heterogeneous, right? Depending on the needs at that moment for the lesson. Um, and I think over the years, I mean, we've been doing this for a while, right? I've developed kind of back pocket strategies that I can kind of pinpoint for each student to help them understand the content.
Yeah. Right. And so let's dive in. Let's dive into that. So what's on tap for the union coming up at the end of this month?
Coming soon. Yeah, we always talk finance. So, and that depends on state budget. So right now, it's not looking as grim as it did a month and a half ago.
Okay.
And so that's something we always negotiate every year. And then part of that is the monthly premium for insurance, whether that be for, what we're asking the district to kick in for employees or what that looks like for additional family members being insured. Um,
So
le-
this is all right now in preparation for negotiations.
yes.
Let's go. Let's talk me a little bit through what are negotiations? How often do you have them? What's the point?
Yeah. So in Colorado, I'll preface that because in Illinois, we didn't negotiate every year. We usually had like a 3 to 5 year contract and you didn't even talk about anything. It was just set. So here, every year we negotiate. We negotiate finance and then any other couple of items from like the association side as well as the district side. And so we usually do that in April and May. And we sometimes do some background work collaboratively with the school district, especially if it's
Hmm.
a very like meaty topic, which will design, ensure that we all have to kind of dig in and do some research and bring some data with us to find out what is the best decision. We do have a little bit of that going on this year. In prior years, we had more joint committees meeting to discuss and do the background work and provide some options that, seem to be the best for everybody or most people. Um, and then we sit at the table. So historically, we've used something called interest-based bargaining, where it's a lot more collaborative in my mind, which was very unique from my experience in Illinois. That
Sure.
traditional hard bargaining. But it's been a really cool experience where, everyone talks about like, what's the background for this and what's everyone's interest in this and where's our common ground and how can we get to a decision that really benefits the majority, right? And so the last couple years, it started to look a little bit different. So the last year was probably the year that it kind of hit the hardest, where
Mm,
it's some interest-based bargaining, but then there were a couple issues that we did very traditional bargaining on. So that was kind of tricky.
hmm
And so sitting at the table, we have our association members who this year have been elected by all of our members, except the president and myself, the vice president, which next year that's going to change.
Sure.
Um, and then we have some district leaders like HR, finance. There's usually some other leaders, the superintendent, the school district lawyer. And then
hmm
the last few years, we haven't had any school board members sitting at the table with us, but prior to that, a couple school board members were always at the table with us since they're the ones that actually like sign the contract with the
Right.
president.
Right. Um, well, thank you. Yeah, so big negotiation coming up
Mhm.
April 25 at 5 p.m. will be the first day. But how long are negotiations typically for like both at those settings with the big table plus just like throughout the process?
Um, do you mean prep work before we actually
Yeah, let's dive into how much extra labor and energy and time away from your family have you already put into this process?
So we've been doing some prep and planning since December.
Hmm
And myself personally, it's usually about 5 to 6 hours a week, and that's going to ramp up
hmm
the coming week as we get closer. And so that's all outside of school time, evenings or weekends, as far as like researching and developing ideas and proposals for language or other resolutions. And then when we're in negotiations, as far as like how much time that takes, it varies from year to year. Sometimes we can come to decisions pretty quickly and efficiently. And then the last couple years, things have started to take a little bit more time. So, I, gosh, I should have done my research on this, Nick, if I had known how much time.
Hundreds. I would say, I mean, combined, right, of all the people, how many folks do you have on your negotiating team from
We
the
have
teacher side?
7 people on our team, and
Yeah.
then we have a couple alternates in case someone isn't able to make it, since it could take more time.
Totally. Yeah. So hundreds of hours combined, of people that are working hard to make sure that we have a good and better system for our kids. So real quick, this again is Better Together. Host Nick Allen here for our Union Month. Thank you all for those that are joining live. You do have a little shout out here, Tracy. Actually, Casey Cole says hello to you. Um, hello back. And yeah, talk to me a little bit more about, what's on tap for this negotiation.
Yeah, so other than finance, the two topics that the association is bringing to the table are class size
Okay.
and staff safety.
Okay.
And we believe that when we talk about staff safety, that also kind of includes and incorporates student safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Primary goal. And class size has come about primarily because that's been like a rumbling throughout all of our educators, right, in classrooms across the district. Some, like in my class this year, it's really lopsided. So I have some really small classes, and then I have one that's kind of big, and then I go down the hall and my colleague has over 30.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that workload's not fair, right? Because they have way more to grade than I do and more students to work with and get to know.
Mm,
And you go across the district and you go to a different level or a different high school, and their class sizes are all above 30. So that workload is very inequitable right now. And so our goal with that is to create that equity piece, right? So that everyone has sort of a similar workload. We've also noticed that as schools have been closed and students have been shifted to different buildings, um, unintended consequences, I believe. But for example, at one of our middle schools, they were told they had to decrease staff by two or three. And
Mm,
when students came in the door the first day, there were way more than they had planned. Then they had to like rapidly try and hire some people to fill the position so there were enough teachers to teach students. So in our belief, right, if we can get this system down and get class size codified, um, that equity would occur across the district in some way.
right. Right. So it's not teachers saying necessarily, right, of like, oh, I want less kids. It's teachers recognizing, oh, I only have, a small amount. I see my colleague down the hall with a bunch. We need to balance this.
Hmm. Hmm. And when I first came here, I thought it was unusual that we didn't have class size or caseload in the contract.
Okay.
Or different system, right? But what I'm finding is I've looked at a lot of contracts across the state. It's very common to have something in there about class size. So it only makes sense that we do the same and just
Hmm.
ensure that that equity is there. We also used to have in the school district, we had what we called like level directors, and that's changed to area directors. But there's always been an unwritten rule as to like the ideal sweet spot class size for levels and content areas and interventions and so on. And it seems like as things are rapidly changing, right, our world is very dynamic right now, that we've sort of lost track of that in some areas of our district.
Right. Right. And there's even state law in regards to like, I know we're looking into some preschools and it's like, one adult to I think 8 to maybe 10, but there's some hard lines early on and they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
So that makes complete sense. Let's talk a little bit about staff safety and student wellness or yeah, staff safety.
Yeah, and I don't know if in your world if you've noticed that this, but most of us have realized since the pandemic, student behaviors have changed
Mm,
in a lot of areas, and there are case studies being done. One case study out of, I'm going to misname it, but it's, not quite as prestigious as Harvard, but it's another university like that. It started
sure.
about 4 years ago, and they're looking at student brain wave, like the neurons and connections, and some of their brains have been rewired or their frontal lobe has developed too quickly
Mm,
at the time to really develop better coping mechanisms and that ability to kind of self-regulate. And so with that we see some, I'm going to call it crazy behaviors, okay,
okay.
across all grade levels, and this has only gotten, it's heightened over the past few years. I mean,
Mm,
my one friend who teaches at an elementary school sent me a picture, no face of any kids showing, but she's like, you are not going to believe this, and it was not sent anywhere else. It was like very personal. The kid was climbing across the whiteboard, like standing on the ledge, and they couldn't get the kid to calm down.
mm,
And so there's that. And then we have teachers who are getting chairs thrown at them.
mhm,
Their personal effects that they bought to make their classroom a better place are being damaged and destroyed. And no one's replacing their stuff. Like they have to pay
mhm,
it again to replace it. Um, Teachers are getting hit and kicked and cussed out. Um, and I don't experience it quite as much. I have a different teaching style than some people, but
mhm,
I still experience it,
mhm.
right? And I have quote unquote mostly like easy kids, I would say. Like they're just, they don't have anything that would cause them to behave in that way.
Sure.
But there are some teachers who are afraid to go to work some days because they're not sure what's going to happen.
Mm,
And we have board policy to safeguard teachers and staff members, but the way that it's followed through is it's not always followed consistently across the district.
mhm.
So it makes it challenging. So we believe that codifying it in our association contract, right? We have some foothold to make sure that those policies are enforced and that staff and students feel safer at school.
So this is already on the books. It's more like and returning back to the importance of a union, just giving some more legal teeth to
Mhm.
it. Is that what you would say?
I believe so. Yeah.
Hmm. For
Hmm.
sure. Well, my last question to you here as we start to head for the wrap, and thank you again so much, Tracy, for joining us here. Um, why you mentioned it's been a lot slower, the process of negotiations. What do you think has caused that issue?
There have been a couple things. There have been more tensions between the association and the current district leadership. I also find that sitting at the negotiations table now compared to 5 years ago, 5 years ago we had a school board member right at the table with us, and we could throw an idea out there and they might decide that at the table, or they might go back in a room and what they call caucus, right? Sit down
Hmm.
and discuss it. And then we can go and caucus for the association as well. um, and then they can come back and say, yeah, but, or yeah, we like the idea, right? Some other offer. And so the last couple years when we've provided like a counter offer or another idea, the people from the school district and the lawyer sometimes have the authority to make a decision on it. And
Mm,
other times they have to wait until they can talk to the school board members because they're no longer sitting in the room even during negotiations. And so it does slow things down a little bit. We've gotten feedback from the district that that's not true, but there were at least 2 days last year during negotiations that we had to close out negotiations for that day because they had to go back and talk to the school board, and we had to, reconvene at the next scheduled date for negotiations.
right. I mean, that's kind of just logistics. At the end, if you're there, you're going to hear it. You're going to be able to respond quicker. So
Hmm.
that does make it tough. That does
Yeah.
make it tough, right? And especially with the amount of hours and people that need to be there, it's hard to just put things to a hard stop and wait.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you for sharing that. Oh, there's a last question here from one of our audience members. So are there actual follow-through procedures in board policy, I guess, in relation to teacher safety and classroom safety?
So I'm going to speak off the cuff and I'm going to be very careful because I don't want to misspeak.
Please.
The board policy identifies like the behaviors and then a plethora of possible consequences.
Mm,
So it isn't like a hard and fast. And then right now, each building has developed what they call a behavior matrix. And so some things have to be common between levels and across schools, and some things are different. Right. So I think our school district does a good job of believing like, what's good for your building. So do what you need to do, but follow these guidelines. So if I were to look at Palisade High School's behavior matrix, which I have,
mhm,
it's very clear on what happens in which situations. And my building principles are cut and dry. Like the minute we're not cut and dry is when kids will find loopholes and
true.
understand what our expectations are. But other buildings across the district, they're maybe not, their behavior matrix maybe isn't super clear, or they struggle to follow through with things. So the disparity between consequences for behaviors or follow through, or being able to coach a kid through a behavior and help them understand why this is not the appropriate way to behave is vastly different across the district. So it makes it really hard.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And especially if we have teachers moving from different buildings too, it's nice to have some understanding of that process early on, and knowing what you're heading into. So class sizes, balancing those. Love
Mhm.
hearing that. That's so important to, have for our students to get good access to education. And then, yeah, we want our kids to be safe. We want our teachers to be safe. So, aligning a policy to that effect is going to be extremely important. So thank you for your work on that, Tracy. Yeah, go ahead and just kind of tell us what's the next step, and how can people support you in this work?
We would love for not just educators, but community members to be at negotiations in the room, to really listen to what's going on. It's a public open meeting. It's been, it's being publicized. They're recorded but not live streamed. So we haven't been able to work that out yet with the district. But our first negotiations is Friday, April 25th, starting at 5 o'clock. We don't know when it ends. Depends. And then we
Sure, bring snacks, right?
yeah, bring snacks. We usually, the association usually puts snacks in the back for people coming to watch. And then April 26th is the next one, starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then we go into, I flip my calendar here just to make sure
Sure.
days correct. May 8th in the evening and May 10th all day. And then we have some other tentative dates if we aren't able to come to full agreements on things after that. But those are the big four right now that we would love to have people in the audience to listen and see what happens.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tracy. Uh, Again, this is Better Together. We're doing our union month. Tracy, I'll let you go and we'll close out here, but just really appreciate it. Good luck. Better Together. We'll be there. Definitely on Friday to cheer you all on, and we're inviting all and everyone to join as well. So thank you again, Tracy.
Thank you, Nick. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Well, thank you all for joining today. Again, this was our first episode of Union Month. Next week, well, I guess this week start on Monday, so next week. Thursday, we are going to be having the firefighter union president, Bryson, will be joining us. So take a look at our Facebook page to get exact details for that. We're excited just to continue to educate you all on the importance of unions and just some of the big updates. Everybody's really busy right now. Some exciting things going on in the world of organized labor. So stick with us. Again, big call to action here for April 25th at 5 p.m. at the Harry Butler Boardroom, which is attached to R5 High School. Everyone's welcome. These meetings are public. It's a fascinating thing to be a part of. I've been to, I think, 3 negotiations now, 4 for my old previous job, being a part of one, but just witnessing it is so important and can really educate you on what's going on and what are the dynamics. So we appreciate Tracy for joining us. We appreciate you for joining us. You can donate at Better Together to kind of help us continue to have time to bring folks on and to continue to build up our presence. So I hope to see you at our next live interview this Thursday, and then in a couple weeks at negotiations for MVEA and D51. Thank you all so much and have a great rest of your Sunday.